So this is Brian Flynn's interview, and I'm just posting this for fair use just to make it more available. So this is by Twin City Fellowship, and the title of their presentation was From New Age to Jesus, the transformation of a New Age medium and his warning to the church. And this is Brian Flynn, part 1.
So I welcome you to Twin City Fellowship. I appreciate that you've taken this time to be with me. I feel very compelled to share this information.
And there's not going to be a video. You can watch the video on YouTube. And the video is on the channel on the number 1 apologetic response. That's the channel. And the name of part 1 of this video is part 1, the transformation of a New Age medium.
I've been teaching about the New Age for several years, and I just, it's something I feel compelled to do. Of course, I was involved in the New Age, and I just want to share with you that Jesus Christ is the answer, and that's why we're gathered. And I enjoy sharing the gospel, but even more, defending it. So let's begin with the technology. What is the New Age? Why has it become the religion of pop culture? How did I get here? Well, I was born in Albany, New York, of 3 children, and my father was Catholic, my mom was Episcopalian, but we were raised Catholic. Now, back then, when my mom got married to my dad, she had to sign a paper saying that she would raise the kids Catholic, otherwise they couldn't get married. So when I was a kid, I noticed that my mom never went to church. It was just my dad and three kids. Now, I didn't really enjoy going to church at all when I was a kid. It was just something I didn't enjoy to do, to get dressed up and when you're about 8 or 9 years old, the last thing you want to do is just dressed up in a suit and tie and things like that. So I really didn't enjoy it too much. So most of the time when I sat in church, I would just try to think of games in my mind to keep myself entertained. So for me, I really never got too much out of the teaching. And the other thing is that within our family, we didn't really talk a lot about God or discuss the Bible ever. I mean, I used to make a joke the only time God would mention Jesus' name is when Notre Dame, fumbled the football. So that just wasn't a part of our life. But one morning I came down for breakfast and my father announced that we were not going to go to church ever again. That we were not going to that. And I was kind of maintaining some emotion, but inside my mind I'm just like, yes, it's great. No more church. This is great news. But I wanted to know why. Well, a couple of weeks prior to that, I remembered this when I was young. I didn't get the details, and the other thing, I was kind of ushered out of the room. But 2 nuns arrived at my home, and there was discussion with my parents, and then the next thing I knew, there was a door slam, and the nuns were gone. Well, they were concerned about that I hadn't made my confirmation, which is, of course, you make your commitment to the Lord. And my father was very disappointed in the Catholic Church because of the changes in Vatican II, that he didn't like people on the pulpit that were not ordained, and he didn't like folk masses and things like that. So he said he was never going back to the church, and he threw the nuns out of our house. So that was when, right after that we decided never to go back to church. And my dad, to give you an idea how committed he was, we might say stubborn, that he never went back. Other than probably going to a church for someone else's wedding, he never went back. In fact, 2 years ago, my dad passed away from cancer. Even when he was given the opportunity for his last rites, my dad refused it. So right until the end, he never, ever came back. So what that meant for me is it opened the possibilities of all other religions. For me, Christianity was now off the table. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't something I wanted to look at. In my mind, yeah, I'd seen that. What else is there? One of the first things I started doing when I was a kid was I started practicing tarot cards. And tarot cards, if you're unfamiliar with them, are a deck of cards. There's 78 cards. There's 22 in the major arcana, 55 in minor arcana. Now, the ones in the major arcana are the ones that are up here that are more definitive, but there's actually 4 decks of 13 cards in the minor arcana. Now, I was like about 14, so the thought of trying to memorize the significance of 78 different cards was a little bit overwhelming. But so I got this book that would explain each card, what it meant. But even more confusing, if you turn the one over, like one of them might be upside down, it would have the opposite meaning. I'm like, oh, I'll never remember this. But the book explained to me that if I took the deck of cards and I placed it under my pillow each night, that I'd get better readings because the cards would absorb my personality and my thoughts. Actually, I think the only thing it did for me is I still have to go to a chiropractor. But what I eventually did was I threw away the 55 other cards and just used them as money because I couldn't memorize them all. So I'd sit in the cafeteria and I would perform readings for my friends. And it was great. Girls thought it was cool. So I was cool because I was the guy that was doing all the card stuff. It was great. But I remember there was this one girl that said to me, she goes, Brian, this stuff is Satan. It's evil. You keep on doing this, you're going to go to hell. I thought, well, nothing bad happens to me. So she was wrong. After I did this for several times, a lot of people liked it. Now, I don't know how accurate I was all the time, but it really didn't matter to me at that time. I just thought it was an interesting thing to do. I knew there was some kind of spirituality out there, and this was just something interesting to perform. And you know what? Nothing ever bad happened to me, so that Christian boy was wrong. Well, I grew up. I decided to go into the Air Force. I wanted to see the world, and I did. Duluth, Minnesota, and Alaska. And I got the northern tour. And during that time when I was in the Air Force, I can tell you most of my life, now surprisingly, was sex, drugs, rock and roll. I got into my first band when I was in the Air Force, and I did more drugs when I was in the Air Force than I did when I got out. So I smoked marijuana, and I didn't do cocaine. It was too expensive back then. They made it so much cheaper and available today. But so I didn't do much of that. But one of the things I did engage in was I dropped acid, or I did LSD. And I remember a friend of mine saying, once you do this, it will change the way you look at things. And I thought, really? He goes, I'm telling you, he goes, once you trip, from then on in, you'll never look at things quite the same. Because it's just a mind-expanding experience. And you know what? He was right. That experience to me opened up a lot of possibilities. It seemed to me there was a world outside what I could experience every day. And you know what? Timothy Leary did some of the same things. He talked about the same things. That he believed that this would open channels to whatever other world was out there. Now, whether people were having a spiritual experience or a drug experience, I don't know. But what it did for me is that I knew there was a world outside myself, that there was another opening. And that's the experience I got out of it. Well, I eventually left the Air Force. I decided to move here to the Twin Cities because some of the guys that I had been involved in the band decided that they wanted to reform the band in Minneapolis. So I moved here, and I decided to go to school. And school wasn't really working out the way I planned because I didn't really have much motivation for it. So I gave my mother the call that most mothers never want to hear. Mom, I've decided to leave college and join a rock band. You know what? So I spent probably the next 8 to 10 years on the road in a van playing all over the place. And my lifestyle was sex, drugs, rock and roll, but maybe not as many drugs as you might think. And I felt free. I loved those years in my life. But spiritually, there was nothing going on in my life. I had no spirituality to speak of at all. In fact, my view of Christians was very negative. They're judgmental, they're narrow-minded, they're always telling people that they're going to hell, and yet I saw that they were hypocrites in the way they lived their lives. In many ways, my dad typified some of that, where his only religious part of his life is going to church on a Sunday morning, but God was forgotten about the rest of the week. So I didn't really see what was the point of becoming a Christian. I met a woman that was involved in Transcendental Meditation. We started dating, and like a typical guy, we'll get into anything that the woman is into at the time. So she said, you should really try Transcendental Meditation. And I said, okay. Well, to me at the time, it was really being sold as, a stress reliever. And my life was pretty hectic at the time, so I thought it might be good. And so I went through TM, and I got some positive experiences out of it. They would instruct you to give you a word or a mantra, and you'd say that word over and over again in your mind. And then eventually you get into this state of mind where this calmness or this silence would begin. And I experienced that, and I thought it was great. I'll be talking more in detail about TM later this afternoon. And then I ran into this person that when I told him I was involved with TM, well, she was a Christian, and guess what she said? Well, Brian, that's Satan, and it's evil, and you shouldn't be doing this, and you'll go to hell. Man, I swear these people all come from the same book. And so, well, nothing bad happened to me, so again, the Christians were wrong. Well, I stopped doing Transcendental Meditation. One is, I guess I was too lazy to do it twice a day for 20 minutes every day. Or maybe it's because I broke up with that girl. And so I eventually met another woman that I ended up marrying that was very much into a lot of different New Age things, all sorts of different things. Crystal healings to meditations, psychic readings, just about everything. And again, I thought it was intriguing, and I had no religious background of my own. So I got involved in a lot of some of the things that she was into. Now, after we got married, a friend of mine and herself both decided to go through this course, where at the end of the course, a year-long course, you could perform psychic readings. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty intriguing. I wasn't really interested in doing psychic readings, but the way they described what they got out of it was really intriguing. They said that they seemed to connect with the power or the universal spirituality. And it seemed really fascinating to me. And they seemed to have something. And since I had nothing, well, something's better than nothing, right? So I decided to take the course. So I went to the woman's home that was teaching this, and essentially you just meet with her for the first time, and she performs a reading for you. Now, I have to give you my idea. Even though I'm supposedly such an open-minded guy, I was very skeptical about a lot of these things. I just thought, there's probably some levers underneath the table she'll pull, or she'll try to draw questions out of me and then be able to tell me about myself. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to really say a whole lot. You ever seen these psychics on TV? They go, to make themselves look like they really, know what's going on. Well, right now, I'm sensing that there's someone in this room that has a name that begins with a letter. Yes. Thank you, I knew that. So I just thought, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not giving her any clues. She's going to have to do me cold. And so she sat across from me and she closed her eyes for a few minutes. And then she started just telling me things about myself that were right on the money. Now, she wasn't just complimenting me to make me feel good so that I go, oh, yeah, that's me. Brian, you're the smartest person I've ever sat across. Boy, does she know what she's talking about. But it wasn't like that. I mean, she was telling me things about myself that I had never shared with anyone. This is pretty interesting. And so I thought, this is cool. I want to do this. And so I began to take the course. So, excuse me. The first thing that we would learn is how to get grounded in earth energy. So if I could, I'm going to kind of demonstrate the process I would go through in order to get prepared for a reading. Now, I'm not going to go through all the steps because, hey, I spent a lot of money on this. I'm not going to give it away for free. And the other, I really don't want to confuse. Okay? So the first thing that we would do is how about this? I'll sit up here a little bit. Is you would sit with your feet planted firmly on the ground. And you would imagine cords or lines pouring from the soles of your feet deep down into the earth, as deep as you can imagine, down to the heat and light and the power within the earth. You would then draw up that power, up those cords, up those lines, to the soles of your feet, up the back of your legs, the base of your spine, which they call the first chakra. And I'll be explaining chakras later. The next thing I wanted to be anchored to the energy and spirituality of the universe. So I would imagine this funnel above my head, and all the power and the psychic energy from the universe would pour through this funnel, through the crown chakra, down my spine, until it would meet with my first chakra. And then I would imagine that power spiraling up and down and surrounding my spine. Now there's about 7 or 8 steps after that, but now I would be connected with Earth's energy and the spiritual energy from the universe. So that was about the first 6 months of the course, of just getting into that state, and I would practice twice a day for 20 minutes. And I did it consistently. And I really did get a good feeling out of it. There was something there that I was seemingly connected to, and it was a powerful experience. But as time went on, I kept on saying to myself, well, how am I going to do readings? I don't have any special abilities of my own. I don't have any ESP that I'm aware of. So how am I going to do readings? So the second half of the course was where you meet your spirit guide. Now, I didn't even know there were necessarily spirit guides. I'd heard of angels and things like that, but who are these spirit guides? And my teacher said, well, all of us have spirit guides around us that are supposedly there to help us, but we just don't know about them, but they're there. But she goes, I'm going to show you how you can connect with them. The first half of the course was really opening the door so that these spirit guides to speak, to get yourself in a state of mind where spirits could speak to you. Now I just needed to identify. So she gave us an exercise where we could identify them. You would imagine a doorway, and each one would step in front of the doorway, so to speak, to introduce themselves. Now this was all in my mind that I would picture. I picture this in my mind. And they all look different. Some were feminine, some were masculine, some were strong, some were weak, some were more like a cartoon characters, some were more like ghostly images almost. And there was, about 12 to 15 of them. But I found out that there was a couple of them that I would probably use the most. And I asked her, why are there so many? Why do we need so many? And she said, well, when you're doing readings, every person's different, and that particular person you're doing a reading for may require a different guide. So, wow, this is really complex. But that's fine with me. So I got to know my spirit guides. And a lot of times my spirit guides I used to divine things for myself. So I thought this was the greatest thing ever. And I felt like, you know what? I'm pretty special to have this power. I'm really connected. And there's so many people out there that are not connected at all. And that's too bad. So after the course concluded, I was doing readings. I actually was doing readings before the course concluded. And I would do a reading for people, and they'd love it. And I wasn't accurate 100% of the time, but they never say you're going to be accurate 100% of the time. But I was doing great things for people. People would call me up afterward and go, "Oh, Brian, that reading you did for me was just fantastic. You really helped me a lot. I want to keep your number because I want to come back and do it again if I need some other things." I said, "Well, great." And then there was this person in my life that was a Christian. And she said to me, "Even though we disagree, I want to be your friend." Now you would think that at this time of my life, with my wife and I both being in the same spiritual plane, doing the same meditations, that the two of us would just think as one and a relationship would be strengthened. But it wasn't. In fact, our relationship became more contentious as time went on. Now, we had some difficulties just like any couple. I'm not trying to say that we were unique in any way. But looking back, I can't remember a time when I was ever so mean to anyone. I just felt angry all the time. And at the same time, I was supposed to be so spiritually connected. So I lost my wife, I lost my house, I lost my car, and I had to file for bankruptcy. And my spirit guides never told me any of this was coming. So I moved out of my house, I sold the house, moved in with a friend that I hardly knew, and I never saw any of it coming. This particular friend, even though she was a born-again Christian, she maintained a friendship with me even though she disagreed. And she asked me, would I be willing to go to church again? And I said, okay. So I went to church, and it was the first positive experience I'd had in church in a long time. Forgetting about the church and the pastor and the teachings, I'll tell you what probably swayed me more than anything. It was you. I tell you, as a New Ager, they watch you. They really watch you. Because you make a significant, unique claim that you say that there's only one way, and it's Christianity. So I have a very skeptical view. But you know what impressed me? That this guy Jesus and this religion you were into was really an important part of your life 24/7. It wasn't just on Sunday. This was in your life all the time. And that impressed me. There was something that you had that I felt that I lacked. I just didn't know what it was. During that time, there was a gentleman that was going to be speaking at the church, and he was a supposed scientist who could prove that the Bible was historically accurate. Yeah, right. Okay. And so I knew what would happen because I've challenged Christians before. You challenge them with a tough question, and then they go, well, Brian, you just have to blindly believe. And I'm like, sorry, it's not going to work for me. So I went to this seminar pretty much thinking, I'll ask this guy some tough questions. He'll fold. That'll be the end of the meeting. Well, Dr. Don Byerly did a seminar, and he was a scientist and a Christian. And I thought, boy, is that conflict. But the first part of the seminar, there was 3 seminars in a row. Part 1, he basically destroyed every one of my arguments the very first night. So I didn't have any questions to ask. He just laid out the veracity of the Bible, in historical terms. I mean, he didn't ask for you to turn off your brain. There was no hallelujahs. There was no singing. He just laid out the facts. And I went out of that meeting going, seriously, oh, darn, this is pretty good. He laid out an impressive case. So I went over the next 2 weeks, and I'm telling you, there was something in my mind that was just pushing me about this. There was something to this. So the last night, he explained a story in the Bible, whereas you're familiar with the story of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son Isaac. And God asked Abraham to travel 50, 60 miles, to walk 50, 60 miles to a particular location. And of course, you know at the end of the story that there was no son sacrificed there that day. But 2,000 years later, on that same spot, Golgotha, is where a son was sacrificed. And I just went, oh boy, that can't be a coincidence. I think that's the story that finally pushed me over the edge. And at the end of that seminar, I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, because I knew he was the truth. As I walked out to my car, this voice came into my head that I was very familiar with. And it said, Brian, you're not a Christian. You just said some words. You're not a Christian. You can't live that life. And over the next couple of days, I engaged in drinking a lot of sinful behavior that I'd never done previous to that. I got drunk. I never drank at home. I got 6-packs, drank at home, got so drunk, 2 nights in a row, I had to take off 2 days of work because I was too hungover to get up and go to work. So I remember it was a Wednesday morning because I didn't go on work Monday and Tuesday. And I sat there and I went, why am I doing this? Why am I behaving this way at this time? Aren't I supposed to be a Christian now? And then, like a veil being taken up before me, I understood that in Satan's attempt to keep me where I was, he had to reveal who he was. Why were these spirit guides who were so friendly now turning against me? Why, if I'm moving towards Christianity, are they upset? Because they're opposed to him. And if they're opposed to them, who does that mean that they are? They are demonic. And I got down on my knees and I prayed and I asked God for my forgiveness. And I knew right then I had been wrong my entire life. That Jesus was Lord and I had been in the wrong place and involved with the wrong spirits. From that point forward, my life turned dramatically because I was now under the blood of Christ and no longer deceived. And it was the greatest single moment of my life. And I am so pleased that there was a friend in my life that was willing to share the gospel with me. From that point forward, God began to give me a direction. And that was to share my story. People wanted to hear it. I began to share it. So this morning I'm going to share with you some of the concepts of the New Age. But a lot of people would start off by saying, well, wasn't that all evil or wasn't that all a fraud? See, I had an argument at the time. I had an experience. It was real. It was good. Therefore, it had to be God. See, that's what I thought. Wasn't I doing good things for people? I mean, weren't they enjoying my readings for them? Yeah, I was doing good things. So if anybody criticized that I was involved in something evil, I just say, hey, I had an experience. It was real. It was good. It has to be God because it was good, right? No. Now, why isn't it good? You see, the reason that demons would do good things is that there's a larger agenda. So while these people would come to me looking for guidance, they were depending upon me to give them guidance in their lives. But where was the guidance coming from? From a demonic entity. So what would happen is people would become more dependent upon me than seeking the truth of God. So that would mean that more people would rely on demonic entities rather than ever seeking the truth of the Lord. That's the long-term goal. So why not give them a little bit of good information here every once in a while? And that'll keep them. Now, do demons know the future? No. Only God knows the future. But then, how are demons able to divine, supposedly, the future? Well, many times, there's information that they may be aware of that is outside our ability to know. They do know some things that we don't know. They do have access to information within all of us. But they don't really know the future, but they may have insight based on their own knowledge that may appear that they know more than they do. Here's my example. Let's say you're in the midst of a big court case, you go to the judge, you present your case, and he says, well, I'll make a decision in 2 weeks, you'll be notified by me. So you go to a psychic the next day, and the psychic says, you're going to win. Then you get the letter in the mail, you open it up, and you won the case. Wow, that Brian, that psychic, he really knew what he was talking about. What we don't know is that the decision was made a day afterward. So it wasn't new knowledge, it was just knowledge that was available at the time that we had not been given yet. So it wasn't predicting the future. But you know what? Even if they don't get it all right, they'll get enough things right to impress you, and then you become more dependent upon a demonic entity than you will seeking the truth of the Lord. There was a woman that went to a psychic. And imagine that she goes to a psychic and she's told these good things. And she goes to her pastor and says, you know, I talked to my dead relatives and I got some insight. Oh, it was the most wonderful experience I ever had. And the pastor goes, Brian, that's wrong. That's divination. You shouldn't be doing that. Well, but I had an experience and it was real and it was good, and well, I think you're wrong. And that Bible that you base your decision on, I think that's wrong too. So you can see why demons do good things. See, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light, it is not surprising then if his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. Now, during my research, you think if I'm going to do seminars on the New Age, I really didn't know a lot about it. I practiced it, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I started doing some research, and I read this book, and I found this to be a very interesting discovery. There was a description in this book by Peter Jones called Spirit Wars, where they had a practice by witches. Now, see if this sounds a little familiar to you. Bring that energy up through your roots into your body. Let it come in through the soles of your feet. right up your body, all the way to your fingertips. Feel that power of the energy. Now allow that energy to spiral around your spinal column, rising and allowing the energy to sprout out your head as branches. And I read that and I went, well, that's witchcraft. I was involved in witchcraft. Actually, I called Peter Jones, the author, and I told him this, and I got in a conversation. He goes, you know what you were really doing? He goes, you're doing a form called Kundalini Yoga. I said, oh, what's that? I'll explain that this afternoon. So let's now go into a little bit about what the New Age believes. Now, this part of the session, this is going to be anti-New Age. So you're going to have to do something completely opposite than the New Age. You're going to have to think. Thinking only, okay? Because that's the opposite of New Age, because they base all their decisions on feelings. So we're going to be talking about what they believe about God, evil, morality, and what do they believe about the Bible. And, of course, truth. Well, Marianne Williamson says God is impersonal, but you can have a personal relationship with God. God is an impersonal object like this glass of water, but I can have a personal relationship with the glass of water. I do feel something inside. That's a nonsensical statement, but again, I told you, we're going to be thinking today. The source of all creation is pure consciousness, pure potentiality, seeking expression from the unmanifest to the manifest. In other words, you can divine your own future, you can manipulate your own future. The creation is just pure consciousness out there that you can have the power to manipulate. Sounds attractive. Kneel to your own self, honor and worship your own being. God dwells within you as you. Remember, but not for the grace of God, we would not be God. Okay, I'll go with that. Divinity is not outside us. We are in God, and God is in us. We are called, like the cosmic Christ, to radiate the divine presence to one another, with one another, from one another. Matthew Fox, he calls himself a liberal theologian. But what is he saying here? Divinity is within. We are ourselves divine. Now, famous theologian Shirley MacLaine says, God lies within, and therefore we are each a part of God. Since there is no separateness, we're each God-like, and God is in each of us. We are literally made up of God energy, therefore we can create whatever we want in life because we are each co-creating with the energy of God, the energy that makes the universe itself. Now, who could remember a statement like that? Let's boil it down to something more simple. I am that, you are that, all this, that, and that's all there is. Now, what are they saying? It's called monism. I am that, you are that, all this is that, and that's all there is. All is God, all is one. Do you notice that where this comes from is Hinduism? Because that's where a great deal of the beliefs of New Age originate. Evil. Until mankind realizes there is in truth no good and there is in truth no evil, there will be no peace. There is no evil, folks. It's just occasional bad decisions by people. Satan, well, fictional. It's creation of late Orthodox Judaism and early Orthodox Christianity in order to demonize their opponents. Satan has no theological or metaphysical existence. So when these Christians talk about Satan, ignore them. There's no such thing. It's just to scare people into coming to church each week. But then, how does one decide moral decisions? Well, let's talk to Deepak Chopra. When your actions are motivated by love, The surplus energy you gather and enjoy can be channeled to create anything you want, including unlimited wealth. Well, yeah. Oh, man, no wonder this guy is popular. So what drives my morality is financial reward. See, if I just motivate myself by love, I just get cash. Somehow, I don't know how. But I guess there's this surplus energy of love that's stored somewhere that you can later withdraw from. I don't know. Ask your heart for guidance. When you have a good feeling, do it. When you have a bad feeling, don't do it. Oh my. Well, that's an interesting concept. Can we kind of challenge Deepak on this for a moment? Let's say I was a good friend of Deepak, and I know he has a daughter. I think she's like in her early 20s. But let's say this was years ago, and she was maybe, 13. Now, in his books, he professes that you should meditate twice a day on practicing non-judgmentalism. And he goes, you really should just practice non-judgmentalism all the time. So I'm doing that, and then I asked my heart for guidance about whether I'd like to date his 13-year-old daughter. And you know what? I get a good feeling about it. So I go to Deepak and I say, you know what? I got 2 tickets to go to a movie tonight, and I'd really like to date your daughter. Now, here's a conflict for Deepak. Should I practice non-judgmentalism at this moment? Well, he did ask his heart for guidance. No! You're not dating my daughter. Get out of here. That's wrong. Well, what are you basing your morality on? Well, Judeo-Christian. I just have a bad feeling about it. See, when push comes to shove, they borrow their morality from us. The tragedy of Christianity is that it has kept untold millions of human beings from sinning, from knowing their own souls. These are the people that are teaching their kids about theology. It's my favorite quote from a theologian. What do they believe about the Bible? It is the winners who write history their way. No wonder, then, that the viewpoint of the successful majority has not dominated all traditional accounts of the origin of Christianity. In other words, it's a made-up book. It will be necessary to go beyond the limits of the New Testament because, since it's a product of the patristic church, that is a theological document of historical winners. In other words, it was done by a bunch of men, and who can trust them? Well, personally, I could care less if the Gospels were written by women, because as we all know, it was not women or men that created the Bible. It was God guiding their hands when they wrote it. So I personally don't care if it's a man or a woman, but that is their lame excuse for not believing that the gospel is true. Truth. Now here's a very long-winded statement. I hope you'll stay with me through it. The most radical postmodernists claim that the social negotiations among influential people construct the truth. The truth is not something lying outside of human collective decisions. It is not a particular reflection of an objective reality. Or to put it another way, objective reality is nothing more or less than what we say it is. We human beings are then the ultimate arbiters of what is true. Consensus is truth. The subjective and the objective are rolled into one inseparable compound. The truth is what we make of it. There is no ultimate truth. We decide what is true on our own. But unfortunately, there's going to be conflicts, aren't there? You see, this is the same type of view that dominated Marxism. That truth was built upon those in power, influential people construct the truth. But the reason Marxism fell is because it was a lie. because there was a greater truth beyond and above us. As Christians, we believe that there is an ultimate authority and an ultimate source of truth that is above us all. Because if it falls to man, then one person's truth is supposedly as good as another. And that's never going to cause conflict. Deepak Chopra said in Newsweek some years ago, they say you have to give up everything to be spiritual, get away from the world, all that junk. I satisfy a spiritual yearning without making people think they have to worry about God and punishment. That's an attractive statement. Since 1521, the British monarch has borne the title of Defender of the Faith. When Charles becomes king, he intends to drop the definite article and be known as just Defender of Faith. As he explains, all religions contain common elements of truth. There is no truth. Pick your religion. Go to the cafeteria at the religion store. Pick out whatever you want. Mix it together. And there's your religion. Do you see how this has influenced the thinking of the world? Because essentially, the most important thing you'll need to know about the New Age is they believe that all paths lead to God. There is no truth about God. You can decide for yourself. But is that really true? You know, I've had so many conversations with New Agers over the years. I'm trying to convince them that this is an irrelevant point, that this cannot be true. Now, it's very difficult because they base everything on what they feel in their heart to be true or not. So it's very hard to think up arguments that they will believe or accept. So I'll share a couple of concepts with you by playing a game. We're going to play truth versus opinion. Okay, my favorite game. I'm glad again to join us. We have some wonderful party gifts for those who don't do well. All right, truth versus opinion. Our first question is this statement true or an opinion? I believe that Godfather pizza is the best pizza in the world. It's opinion, of course. I believe that Brainerd is the only city anyone should know. Every once in a while, there's someone from Brainerd that disagrees with that. It's true. Martin Luther King was shot. True. Correct? Magellan and his crew circumnavigated the earth in 1521. I was like, oh gosh, let's come back to grade school. That happens to be true. Chunky Monkey ice cream is the best flavored ice cream in the world. Well, that's true for me. And isn't that what it's all about? My truth. Jesus Christ died on the cross and was raised from the dead, proving that he was Lord. See, New Agers would answer, that's an opinion. See, when people say the most favorite phrase out there these days is, well, Brian, that's your truth. Haven't you heard that? Oh, I hate that. I hate that statement. It's kind of a left-handed compliment and the same way of dismissing your view. Well, I understand you believe that, and that's your truth. No, there's no such thing as owning the truth. You can have an opinion, but ultimately there is a truth. Either Jesus is Lord or he's not. You have to decide. Are there then multiple truths? Now, I would say to them this. I said, back during the trial of O.J. Simpson, was O.J. Simpson guilty or not? Now, some people believe that he was set up and that he wasn't guilty. And other people are absolutely convinced that he is. But we can agree upon one thing. No matter what your position is, The answer can't be both. Right? He can't kill his wife and not kill his wife. It's one or the other. Can I really say to the person that believes that he's guilty, well, that's your truth? No, that's their opinion. But ultimately, there is a real truth there. It's one or the other. And don't you think that that would also apply to God, that there is a truth, one truth? But in the New Age, no. So when we talk about God, is there an ultimate truth? Well, in the world's religions, you can boil them down to these two concepts. God is either personal or impersonal. Now, what I mean by impersonal is a entity, a feeling, a consciousness, whereas a personal God that's shared by the beliefs of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that there's a personal God, that he thinks, that he loves, that he cares, that he listens. That is an element of a personal God, where an impersonal God does not speak. He does not love. It's just, in other words, the difference between a who and an it. Can God be both? But this is what people will tell me. Well, you're trying to quantify God and as some elemental truth, but you know, God just can't be quantified that way. Yes, he can. God can't lie. There is some limitations. Can God both be an impersonal it and a who at the same time? Can God listen and have the ability to listen and the ability not to listen at the same time? Well, God is like the wind. Well, God could be like the wind for a day if he chose to. But if he's choosing, doesn't that make him thinking? And if he's thinking, doesn't that make him a personal God? See, in Western civilization, we have borrowed Eastern ideas and shaped them into Western thought. So what they're doing, most of them, is personalizing an impersonal God, trying to satisfy both sides. That is impossible. It is either one or the other, not both. I choose personal, and I'll tell you why. How could an impersonal entity create a being with personality? There I go thinking. So what is the beliefs of the New Age? God is impersonal, evil is non-existent, morality can be determined on its own, the Bible is unreliable, and the truth is relative. But we've learned today that God is both. They never really quantified the differences because we just want to all get along and not really make a decision. So, how do they make decisions about how they lead their life and what they think of God? I call this section Books and Gurus. Where did they get that idea? The Guru's books, tapes, and appearances on Oprah. Let's talk about Oprah. Now, in this section, I just want to warn everybody that I will be discussing some people, and I just want to let you know that these are not bad people. I am questioning their ideas. I do not think that Oprah's a bad person, not in the least. But I will question some of her ideas and some of the people that she has on her show. She is probably the biggest promoter of New Age material that there is. For example, if you get on her show, you're guaranteed a bestseller. Deepak Chopra, one day on her show, he sold 20,000 books in one day, which I'm hoping to do today, so please cooperate. A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, 70,000 copies in one day. That's an incredible amount. One appearance. Now, what does Oprah believe? Oprah says, every morning I watch the sun come up and I center myself and I try to touch the God light that I believe is in all of us. I call it centering up. I get boundless energy from it, and the day I don't do it, I find myself loose and misdirected. As I study the New Age movement, it all seemed to say exactly what the Bible has said for years, but many of us were brought up with a restricted, limited understanding of what the Bible said. I think she's a little confused on that. If she cannot tell the difference between the Bible and the New Age, she is badly misinformed. Now, I know she grew up in the church, but I think she's been a little bit swayed lately. She says this: one of the biggest mistakes we make is to believe there's only one way. There are many diverse paths leading to God. Again, that's a view that can't be held by a Christian. The rest of the people can, they can believe what they want, but if you call yourself a Christian, you can't believe that Jesus is the only way and believe that there's other paths at the same time. That's a conflicting view. You can't hold both. Now, this is what she does on a daily basis, and I think this is very instructive, and I want you to keep this in mind for the second half this afternoon. The greatest way for me to connect to my spirit is to connect the capital of who I am, the real who of who I am, is through meditation. She's prayed all her life. I grew up speaking in the church, praying, offering prayers. I think the first word I was taught to speak was prayer. But meditation, she said, for her is different. It's just being still and knowing that there is something much greater than yourself at work within yourself. It is that stilling and the quieting of the world outside so that you can come to know the truth, the authentic truth of who you really are. So by this practice within, I get to know myself better. We'll discuss that later today. Anthony Robbins. Now you might wonder, why do I bring up a guy like Anthony Robbins? He's the kind of the positive, motivational guru, probably more prevalent in the 90s. He wrote a couple of books, Unlimited Power and Awaken the Giant Within. Now, I tell you, I was a big Tony Robbins fan because I wanted to control my life and be motivated and do really well. That's one of the things he does. I'll explain what that is later. And so I was just intrigued. Why? Because I wanted to get stuff. And I knew that my deep, unconscious trouble from my youth and my upbringing was limiting my ability to expand and be successful. And if I only raised my voice like this, I'd be more successful. Well, maybe for Tony. But what does Tony believe? 2 or 3 times a month, I'd attend a totally different type of worship, Lutheran, Catholic, Buddhist, whatever. As a result of this, I began to truly live at a more spiritual level, where I began to appreciate all people's spiritual beliefs. Even if I didn't subscribe to their particular rules and perceptions, I had a much broader base of understanding and compassion as a result. In other words, he doesn't seem to believe anything in particular. Now, he uses phrases from the Bible in his books. But his goal, of course, is first to live your life in such a way that causes you to feel tons of pleasure and very little pain. Yeah! All right. I had a friend that used to do that on a nightly basis with a bottle of Jim Beam. But what happens is when you create your own reality, you are responsible for it. Psychologist Ken Wilber says, I call it neurogenic guilt. Guilt caused by the New Age mentality. You create your own reality, you control the entire world, and if you get a disease of any sort, it's your fault. If you're in charge, everything is your fault. Oh, that's kind of a negative side to being God, isn't it? So why does he put phrases of the gospel in his books? Well, as we all know, there is certainly wonderful, logical, loving things in the gospel, and why not use them? The other thing is I think he thinks by quoting the Bible, he'll look like he's a Christian. Maybe some people will buy the book that are worried about whether he's New Age. I don't know. But when he uses them, he takes them out of context. Now, the King James Version says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Now, he takes that and he says, well, we must program ourselves for success and create a plan for a compelling future. Is that what that says? Actually, where he's getting is that where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law. That isn't a way to program ourselves for success and future. Where this is talking about, remember Moses, where he was, God gave him the 10 Commandments, and he went down the hill with the 10 Commandments, and what did he see? People that had cast off restraint. See, Tony Robbins isn't saying to follow narrow laws. He's not. So he just uses the Bible out of context, which you'll see New Agers do all the time. They borrow from it when it's convenient for them. In the beginning was the Word, the Gospel says. But no, it's important to realize that words shape our beliefs, they impact our actions. If we want to change our lives, we need to consciously select the words we're going to use. That's not what that means. If he knew what the Bible was, he would know that the Word was God. It wasn't an actual word in the dictionary. Now, here's the Bible in context that you will never see in a self-help book. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up the cross and follow me. Oh, I don't think we should put that in the book, Tony. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Oh, that doesn't sound very self-empowering. See, the single greatest potential God desires to maximize to its fullest is serving him, glorifying him, and humbly walking in obedience to him. I will venture to guess that if you went through every self-help book, the word obedience would not be found. Obedience is never used in our culture ever, because that means being subservient to something greater than yourself rather than just yourself. That's not going to be found in a self-help book. My favorite book of all time that I like to share with you is Conversations with God. This is one of the most influential books worldwide by Neale Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. Now, I sent him an idea that he didn't respond to. I said, well, I've got another title for your book if you'd like to use it in the future. Conversations with the do anything you want type of God. He never responded to my email. I don't know why. So here's the story of Neale Donald Walsh. He was frustrated with life. He had just recently gone through his fourth divorce. I can see why he's a little stressed. And he was saying, I don't like my life. I don't understand life. God, would you please explain it to me? And God answered him. And Neale wrote it down, and we can find out, we can read it. How good is that? He had a conversation with God, and luckily he had a pen and paper handy. So I'm going to share with you what God told him, and we'll all know. God said this, I never set down a right or a wrong, a do or a don't. To do so, to be distributed completely, your greatest gift, the opportunity to do as you please. Wow. Now that's my kind of God. That's what I'm talking about. To prohibit you, to restrict you, would mean to deny the reality of who you really are. Yeah, that's right. What else? Well, I tell you, I despise nothing. None of it is repulsive to me. Evil is that which you call evil. Yet even that I love, for it is only through that which you call evil that you can know good. It's all relative. I do not love good more than I love bad. Hitler went to heaven. When you understand this, you'll understand God. Oh, Hitler went to heaven. Well, that means I'm in for sure. I haven't even murdered one person. I'm in. Wow. Now, you see, that's a forgiving God. Now, he explains further, Hitler went to heaven for these reasons. There's no hell. So there's no other place for him to go. Makes sense to me. And Hitler's actions were what you call mistakes. The actions of an unevolved being, and mistakes are not punishable by condemnation, but dealt with by providing the chance for correction, for evolution. The mistakes Hitler made did no harm or damage to those whose deaths he caused. Those souls were released from their earthly bondage like butterflies emerging from a cocoon. I wonder if Neil and his God would be willing to take a tour of the Holocaust Museum. Now, I didn't realize that Hitler, when he killed people, was just releasing people. That's a despicable statement. But this book has sold millions. Now, Neil and God get into a little disagreement here. I call this section of the book Contradictions with God. God says, if you ever take an alcohol into your body, you have very little will to live. Well, I drink very moderately. The body was not meant to take in alcohol. It impairs the mind. It's wrong. Did God say something was wrong? I thought there were no wrongs. See, a lot of people will say to me, oh, Brian, you don't like the book because you're a Christian. See, you're just going to compare it to the Bible, and if it doesn't adhere to the Bible, then it's wrong to you. I don't need the Bible. God contradicts himself in his own book. I don't care if you're a Hindu, you should be able to see through this. Treating others with love does not necessarily mean allowing them to do as they wish. I mean, you can't let them do what? What is wrong, God? So God's now saying there are wrong things to do. I thought there were no wrong things. See, I believe that a true God would not contradict himself. Now, here's where God's me imitates some guy in a bar. Imagine, ladies, you're sitting in a bar and this God comes up to you. Hey, baby, put away your pointless taboos and restrictions upon your sexual energy. You know what I'm saying, baby? I can't do that. I'm a Christian. Well, let me tell you, baby, what has been described as the fall of Adam was actually his upliftment. You know what I'm saying? The act of Adam and Eve was not original sin, but in first blessing. Don't let this guy buy you a drink. Therefore, resist not temptation, for there is no such thing as an incorrect path. For in this journey, you cannot not get where you are going. So there is no incorrect path. Now, there's a perception in the New Age. Is God only love? Is God only love? Now, this is an argument I get into with New Agers all the time. That they view our view of God as being, a punisher. Our God is just love. parent. And how many people have children? Okay, all right. You're the ones that look like you're tired. Okay. Now, how many of you can remember back to the age of 14? Okay, none of you. All right. But if you can try, remember when you were a kid, you wanted to do certain things, so your parents were always telling you, no, you can't do that. But Johnny Johnson's parents let. So your child decides that he wants to hitchhike out to California by himself. And he knows that if he goes to Dad's going to say no. But recently, cool Uncle Larry came to live with them. And if I ask Uncle Larry, he'll say yes. Uncle Larry spent most of his time in Haight-Ashbury during the 60s, and he says yes to about anything. So he goes, yeah, man, it's cool. You can go. It'll be a trip out there. You'll love it. Why is your parent saying no? Cool Uncle Larry says yes. Because your father loves you. Why does he say no? See, love is also expressed through restrictions and discipline. Well, you know that now as a parent, don't you? You want to protect your child from doing certain things because they may get into a situation of harm. Isn't that an expression of love? The opposite expression of love is the Uncle Larry type of God. Do whatever you want. When you say this to a child, what do you think they'll hear? The parent says this: do whatever you want. What's the translation? I don't care. A true God of love would discipline and place restrictions on its children. So by their definition, their God can't be love. In Hebrews it says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as son. A true God of love would set restrictions. That is why I know that the God inside of the book of Conversations with God is not God. His God is a God of ambivalence. And here he proves it. God says, you're living your life the way you were living your life, and I have no preference in the matter. This is a grand illusion in which you engage. That God cares one way or another what you do. I do not care what you do, and that's hard for you to hear. Yeah, actually it is hard to hear. The conversation continues. You cannot know God until you stop telling yourself that you already know God. You cannot hear God until you stop thinking that you've already heard God. I cannot tell you my truth until you stop telling me yours. Walsh says, but my truth about God comes from you. Who said so? Well, leaders, ministers, the Bible, for heaven's sake. Those are not authoritative sources. They aren't? No. Well, then what is? Any guesses? Listen to your feelings. Listen to your highest thoughts. Listen to your experience. Whenever any one of these differ from what you have been told by your teachers or reading your books, forget the words. Words are the least reliable purveyor of truth. Interesting concept. So just feel and experience, and the truth will just magically appear to you. Here's the quote of the book that I think sums it up for me. I've searched the path to God all my life, and now I found it, and I can't believe it. It feels like I'm sitting here writing this to myself. You are. Now, in this context, of course, what is God saying? You are talking yourself as God because you are God. But this last one sums it up. You'll never find me in your mind. In order to truly know God, you have to be out of your mind. To read this book and believe it, you have to be out of your mind. There's no doubt about it. Now, I'll give you a little insight into what Neil Donald Walsh is up to lately. In 1997, the United Religions Initiative gave Walsh the leadership of his Committee on Spirituality and the Global Social Agenda. Walsh said they expect the creation of a United Religions organization similar to the United Nations between the year 2000 and 2015. At the URI Summit, Walsh said he represents the 1 million truth seekers who have purchased his books and made him the latest superstar in the spiritual circuit. If anything, I represent a new paradigm of religionless religion, a religion without structure, a spirituality without boundaries. This is kind of where we are heading. And who is in the way? We are. See, if we would erase doctrine, maybe we'd all get along and we could have one world religion. The nature of man is this. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worship, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. What fuels us is the incredibly awesome, all-powerful self. The self decides everything. In almost every New Age book, they always capitalize the word self. It's very interesting. Is the self the relier of how to solve one's problems? How many times have you heard this phrase? Brian, you need to look inside yourself to find the answers to life's problems. Okay. Well, let's try that exercise for a moment. Let's say I'm having trouble with, my finances. Or let's say I have a drinking problem. We'll do that. I have a drinking problem, and talk to myself about it. Okay? Here we go. Brian? Hi. I have a drinking problem. Could you help? Brian, I hate to tell you this, you're talking to yourself. Yeah, but I'm supposed to be searching inside myself for the answer, and aren't you it? No, you goofball, you're talking to yourself again. How can you resolve yourself's problems by yourself? Now, think of all the problems that we as human beings face that are devastating to us. Divorce, death, financial ruin, chemical dependency. There's a host of devastating problems that maybe some of you experienced or you know others have experienced. And we attempt to resolve these all on our own. I don't think that's the best way. Remember the young kid who wanted to go out and hitchhike out to California? Well, he decided to go anyway. And he got in a little trouble. And so he got a little drunk, has been drinking for a long, long time, ended up in a bar, got in a fight, and now he's sitting in jail. And he realizes that he's made some serious errors. Now, who does he call? He'd like to call his best friend who also has a drinking problem because they can kind of relate. But he needs an authority to help bail him out of jail. So what he's looking for is an authority that can tell him what is true and assist him, but he also wants somebody that kind of relates. I mean, they say one of the most effective things in treating alcoholism is talking to people that have the same problem. They can relate. You can talk to those people. Isn't it interesting that when you have a problem, the first thing you do is just don't sit quietly by yourself waiting for an answer? Don't you pick up a phone and call your friend? Isn't that looking for answers outside yourself? So the dilemma is, again, the same thing. I need an authority and then one that can relate. Does not sound like Jesus Christ. He is God. He is our authority. But because he lived the life of a man, he relates to you because he experienced the complete human reality. The answer will never be found inside yourself. It will be found outside yourself in the only authority that there is, that is Christ Jesus. The solution that the New Age offers is empty. Deepak says, and when you realize that our true self is one of pure potentiality, we align with the power that manifests everything in the universe. It never works. It's interesting to note, one of the biggest complaints that New Age teachers say is that, my people come to me and they constantly complain. They've gone through this modality, they've gone through this type of practice, that type of practice, listen to this guru and that guru, and they keep on saying it at the end of it, when will this end? Never on the path you're on. Isn't it interesting that the gurus that were tops in the 70s and the 80s now are forgotten? That the guru that they were into a couple of years ago has now been replaced by somebody new, thus proving that their ideas didn't work in the first place. You see, it all stems back to the original, right in Genesis, right in the Garden of Eden. It comes back to the very first lie. You must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden and must not touch it or you will die. Surely you will not die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, choosing for yourself and knowing good and evil on your own. There's nothing new about the New Age, except for one thing, that some of the beliefs and the ideas have entered the church, and I will be addressing that after lunch.
Thank you for listening to part 1, and I'm going to take a break. There is a part 2 that I will be recording for fair use. I feel like this is really important information. I'm going to put the link in the chat if you want to listen to it yourself. And actually, that link will have the video part of his presentation. And it's just, yeah. And then you'll have better control of the audio as well. So God bless.